Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight, or today, I should say. Well, I did work all day, so this is sort of this evening, if you will. We have a full review of a fragrance that I've been sitting on for a long time. We're going to continue our Francesca Bianchi week. God willing, there'll be a third Francesca Bianchi review coming up very soon. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. It depends how I feel. And then I think I'm going to try and knock out maybe the final sample that I have. So maybe one or two more Francesca Bianchi reviews, and then I'm going to do a ranked Francesca Bianchi video. Even though this is the only full bottle I have, I've done a lot of work with this house, and I think I'll be coming up on 10 reviews. So I think we can do a top 10. So that'll be a lot of fun. But today we're going to talk about my only full bottle from the house, and it is called Etruscan Water. Okay, so you can see I've given this a fair amount of wears, okay? Probably worn this as my scent of the day 5 or 6 times, which when you have a huge collection, each wear is kind of targeted, especially for the channel. You know, I, believe it or not, wear things specifically in mind to do these type of reviews. I also even went and hunted down the box, so you all should feel very blessed because it is a bitch to find these boxes when you have 600 boxes floating around. But I found this little baby box, and Francesca Bianchi sells her fragrances in 30 ml and 100 ml bottles now. The 30 ml bottles are 108 euros. The 100 ml bottles are 235 euros. So you get a little bit better value for money with the 100 ml. But when you have a huge collection, the 30 mls are more than enough. Like I said, 5 or 6 wears, and look how much juice I still have left. So a lot of juice still to enjoy. So let's read the blurb. Let's talk a little bit about Etruscan Water. Interestingly enough, the name is actually Freefall Etruscan Water, not just Etruscan Water. Everyone just calls it Etruscan Water, but I'll tell you something that's been kind of going through my head. By the way, I'm going to do a fresh spray because, well, I want to show you guys the atomizer too. I really don't like the atomizer on these bottles. They almost like just poof, mist at you. I like it when it's a little bit more targeted, but I've been wearing this as my scent of the day all day, and the opening is beautiful. I must admit, it is a beautiful opening, and this fragrance is basically a proper Chypre fragrance, okay? My favorite category of perfumes, if you're just making me kind of rank my favorite category, Chypres would be right at the top, okay? So one thing that has been kind of floating around my head all day is my mentor used to tell me something that has stuck with me forever. I'll remember it till the day I die. He used to always say, Ramsey, with all knowledge comes responsibility. And you know, in the perfume game, the thing is, when you have a further frame of reference, when you have knowledge of the past, okay, and comparing to the future and stuff like that, you have more and more and more frames of reference. Everything you smell is almost like a catalog that goes into your brain, and you can almost recall it. Now, some things, you know, when you smell a bunch of things and you turn into a real frag head, you can't remember everything, but some fragrances and ideas and concepts kind of stick with you, right? And it's like knowing what's behind the door without even having to open it, or guessing the plot of a movie because you've seen this before. It's not your first rodeo, okay? As the Texans say. Thank you, ma'am. So this is basically a green leathery Chypre done in the vintage style, is basically the way that I would describe it, with these modern Francesca Bianchi-like ingredients. And of course, her patented orris butter DNA. But in Etruscan Water, that orris butter thing that she overdoses, that I talked a lot in about her fragrances, does not feel overdosed here. This is actually one of the more balanced Francesca Bianchi fragrances, okay? I think she equally balanced this fragrance very well. And one of my biggest beefs with the brand is that I've called her a lazy perfumer. I think she just overdoses that orris butter, iris / DNA, whatever you want to call it, accord, and it kind of tends to overshadow a lot of different things, okay? So, but then on the other hand, that's her most popular work. I think the stuff that she does that with is her biggest sellers, and that's probably why she keeps doing it over and over again. But some of the ones that I could point to, if you go watch my reviews for things like Under My Skin or Lover's Tale, or even just yesterday off of a sample I reviewed, Unspoken Musk, a 2022 release, and so those really overdose, I think, that orris butter accord. This is much more balanced, and Etruscan Water came out in 2019, okay? Spicy green, almost leathery Chypre is how you could describe it. It has notes of oak moss, immortelle, caraway, labdanum, orris root, basil, bergamot, green mandarin orange, musk petitgrain, ambergris, grapefruit, jasmine, and vetiver, okay? So I'll read you the little blurb. We'll talk a little bit about it, but here is what the website has to say about Etruscan Water. So they call this a citrusy, spicy, powdery chypre that is classic, seductive, exciting, and refreshing. In the south of Tuscany, you are approaching sorry, I just lost my place. In the south of Tuscany, you are approaching an enchanting bay by walking through the most beautiful and intoxicating Mediterranean vegetation. Your skin is warmed up by the heat of the southern sun, yet you are invigorated by the salty and refreshing smell coming from the sea. Now, just one thing that I have to mention, even though it literally has the name water in the title, in the name, and there's water on the box. I mean, this looks like water to me, or maybe like a watercolor, but there's definitely this water accord listed. This is not an aquatic, okay? So if you're worried about this being an aquatic, you do not have to worry about that. This is much more of a bitter green, herbal, as the brand just said, vegetal chypre, okay? With her in-house DNA accord. So basically, they say that the inspiration for Etruscan water comes from two different sources. The first one is my personal memory being born and raised in Tuscany. We could go to the beach in the south of the region where hundreds of years ago our forefathers, the Etruscans, used to live. And if you know your Roman history, you know that the Etruscans were absolutely badass, although the Romans did kick their fucking ass all over the place. In order to access the most stunning, well-hidden small bays and offering the most transparent water, there was a 30-minute walk through the woods. These woods are full of wonders. The smell of typical Mediterranean vegetation is charming and, excuse me, I really need to stop eating before these, but there's only so much time to do these videos when you work all day. If you're lucky or unfortunate, you could bump into a wild boar or even some remains of the Etruscan civilization. Okay, maybe that's pushing it a little far. The salty, refreshing smell of the sea soothes you from the heat of the sun that is warming up your skin. The second source of inspiration is my personal research on masterpieces of perfumery, as I have recently been intrigued by the classical masculine citrusy cologne, not the light ones, but those with strong character. This is the first release of the line Freefall, opening to a new direction in my work. Okay, interesting. So that's why it says Freefall, Etruscan Water. And as always, there is a poem by, I don't know who this is by, but it says, the time bomb of your life has come. People may come, people may go, just as long as the water's slow. But watch out when you're headed for the waterfall. Dry land is just a love away, warm sun and a place to lay. I see your future, the water above your calm, you calm and clear. People may come, people may go, just as long as the water's slow. But watch out when you're headed for the waterfall. All right, so watch out for the damn waterfall. So, interestingly enough, as I said, this is one of those Francesca Bianchi fragrances that allows some of the other notes to shine. So if you are an adamant follower of Channel Ram, if you're part of the Ram fam, you have seen me review and talk about other Francesca Bianchi fragrances ad nauseum. I've done a lot of work with this house. And many times my beef, you'll hear me say something like, for example, oh, this has bergamot, but I mean, her iris accord or her orris butter accord just kind of overshadows it and just completely knocks it out of the way, and you can barely smell it, if at all. You know, this one is different. This one, the focus on the citruses in the opening is evident and clear. And most of the times, and I'll talk about why I say that soon, but most of the times when you first spray, you will basically get the herbal, vegetal, citrusy notes in the beginning. Very prominent, okay? Like I'm getting them right now, and it's absolutely beautiful. I got it when I sprayed it when I got home from work. And like I said, not overshadowing the citrusy opening. Many chypre fragrances have bergamot in the top, and they have labdanum and oak moss in there, and usually some patchouli of some sort, right? But her orris butter accord almost acts like yeast rising in the oven. So think about, you put a dinner roll in the oven, or you put a roll of some sort in the oven, a croissant, and it just rises, right? As the yeast rises, and it just fills in all the holes in the bread, and it becomes large and big. And her fragrances feel a lot like that, but also you can think of it like, imagine having like a coloring book where all the different parts are separated. You color this beautiful picture, it's all white, and the kid just takes the crayon and says, forget about the lines, and just scribbles all over the paper with one color, right? And sometimes that's how her orris butter accord feels. Like there's this entire drawing or painting underneath, but you can't smell it. In Etruscan Water, she does it in a way where that bitter green, mandarin orange, and herbal basil really kind of shine through. So the green mandarin orange is mixed very early on with this very sour, salty and sour ambergris, and that's about the extent of the watery part that you're going to get. This ambergris, which is salty, it does give off a little bit of an animalic note, okay? But many of her fragrances have things like civet or castoreum or stuff like that. This doesn't have any of that. The extent of the animalic note is basically that ambergris, okay? Which is maybe one of the first. I'd have to go back and look at the note listings of all of the Francesca Bianchi fragrances I've reviewed, but she loves putting a drop of animalics or two. That's really why I do enjoy her work, is because she loves using animalics. Some more heavy-handed than others, but this is the one where that ambergris is the animalic, not castoreum or something like that, or civet, right? So usually ambergris works as almost like an ancillary note. Sometimes you can feel the presence of ambergris more than you can really smell it. And here, you get it in the opening. It almost enhances it. It allows some of those citrusy green herbal notes to shine. And when it hits your nose, that sour ambergris hits it on a way where it really feels like you're up on a cliff looking down. You know, you can see the ocean, but it's way down there, right? You're not going to jump off of the cliff and go into the water. You'll be dead. You're way up there, but you can still hear the ocean crashing against the rocks and all that stuff. So that's the extent of the aquatic part of this fragrance. This is much more a green chypre than anything else, a green, spicy chypre, okay? In the background is her orris accord, but this fragrance, she's managed to contain it. She put it on a leash. She tied it to a tree, whatever she did. It is bundled up, okay? And you can bet your bottom dollar that if you go looking for it, you will smell it, all right? So right now, mostly my nose is getting that beautiful, bitter citruses with the touch of green, the green basil, the green mandarin orange or tangerine, whatever she calls it, kind of mixing in. But you can bet your bottom dollar if you go hunting for that orris accord, you will smell it. It's just... So this is about a 2.5 hour dry down, and it is much, much more prominent here than it is here, okay? So the first 15 to 30 minutes, you're really going to get a lot of the citruses and the fresh notes and all that stuff. It is not overshadowed by that orris accord, okay? And it really is one of, I would say, a handful of her fragrances that allow some other notes to kind of take over. So I plan on reviewing the fragrance called Black Knight very soon. That's the one that Nissan from Canada very kindly sent me a decant, and I've probably had it for over a year. I've just tested occasionally here and there. And Black Knight, she allows this very dark, earthy vetiver to kind of shine through. In another one of her creations, Sticky Fingers, she allows this honey-like patchouli done in like the 70s style, done in like a Givenchy gentleman style to kind of shine through, right? And there's some other ones you can go check out. There's an entire Francesca Bianchi playlist if you really want to get into the weeds, okay? But here, this is the one where she really allows the citruses and the freshness of the ambergris, you know, kind of highlighting, shining that spotlight on the citruses and allowing them to really shine, allowing them to be fabulous citruses in the opening. And it gives it that earthy, green, herbal smell that just adds this freshness to it. This is definitely one of the fresher smelling Francesca Bianchi fragrances I've ever smelled. Now, I know she has some other fragrances that reference water that I've never smelled. So, for example, she has Sex in the Sea. She has Sex in the Sea Neroli. I haven't smelled either of those. And I think they may even be part of this Freefall line, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to check. But the basil adds that green, earthy, herbal smell that makes it feel fresh and green. And it works in tandem with sort of the green mandarin orange feel, okay? Adds a little bit of tartness to it. Actually, a lot of bit of tartness. There's this tart, herbal, citrusy, fresh feel. Very rindy, peely, rindy. You know, think about bergamots fresh out of Tuscany, or, you know, think about that green mandarin orange that just feels like it isn't ready to be picked yet. And I know green mandarin orange, I think, is a specific, I don't think they mean that the mandarin orange is green and not ready to be picked yet. I think it's literally a specific type of essential oil, but here it does give off this almost like fresh, you know, like still on the tree. It hasn't been picked yet, and it just has this combination, which in particular, I think when you kind of combine those two, you get this smell that almost feels like the freshness of Neroli without the soapiness. So imagine the bitter green aspects of Neroli without the soapiness, okay? And in place of that soapiness is almost this bitter quality that leans so far to the bitter side that it almost smells pissy in effect. And I think that's probably the ambergris, if I was guessing. If you really twisted my arm and made me guess, I would probably say that the bitter quality, almost feels like you're smelling the animalic side of ambergris, or what it smells like is like this black currant leaf. If you ever smell black currant leaf, not the fruit, that's more that is much less pissy and bitter and green. The leaf itself gives off this, this pissy, bitter green like smell. And that doesn't even mention the grapefruit in here. So the grapefruit has a very important job in this fragrance. It really feels like it carries this pissy green bitter combo to your nose and allows your nose to read it in a way where the citruses feel fresh, like you're literally on the Tuscany coast, okay? And so the fragrance basically in the opening is dry, green, bitter, slightly pissy, slightly sparkly because of that ambergris, of course. Imagine the sun sparkling off of the ocean, if you will. And it's interesting because this is one of the more unique Francesca Bianchi openings for her fragrance line. Now, this is not a unique smell in and of itself, but for the Francesca Bianchi line of fragrances that I've smelled, I've never smelled anything that smells like this. This is kind of singular in her universe, if you will. And it really solves the problem, I think, of what I've been harping on her this whole time. I've been giving her a very hard time, at least in my videos. Not that she gives a shit. She probably doesn't care what I care. But, I've been pretty tough on her as far as the overdose and what makes it feel like a lazy perfumer, okay? So herein lies the rub. And this YouTube channel is really about giving my opinion, my honest opinion, my 2 cents. Whether you like it or the YouTube algorithm likes it or not, doesn't matter to me. I'm going to give my 2 cents. End of story. And I must admit, I understand I'm a very complicated ram. Sometimes I'm very hard to please. Sometimes I feel like a bitter old man up here complaining. But the reality of the situation is that probably the best thing that she has done for her is that orris butter iris type accord that she built, okay? So here, the orris accord feels like opening a fresh dinner roll straight out of the oven. You get that steam being released, you get that yeast rising, whatever, you want to sort of apply that in your head, however imagery you can wrap your head around that. And all of her fragrances that I've smelled have this almost like human element to them, this human skin, this saltiness. The ambergris here could be considered a good replacement for the saltiness of human skin as well. And while Etruscan Water isn't my favorite, in fact, if someone came to me right now and said, Ramsey, I would trade you a bottle of the Lover's Tale or Under My Skin or Sticky Fingers or one of those for Etruscan Water, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And herein lies the rub. My favorite fragrances from Francesca Bianchi, like the Lover's Tale, for example, are done in a way where they are overdosed with the ingredient that I give her the hardest time about, all right? So, as I said, a very complicated situation to have, because on one side, I'm talking about my personal taste. On the other side, I'm talking about me trying to review a fragrance and be objective, right? And those are sometimes two completely different things. And so my heart is torn on her fragrances, if you will. There's a split. There's a split between one side of my brain and the other side. And so the other thing I think it's very important to continue on, as we continue on in our journey of discussing Etruscan Water, is that my interpretation of Etruscan Water, and one of the reasons why I've waited so long to review this, to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure when I bought this, but I think it was end of 2019 or early 2020, is the way that the fragrance breaks down on my skin has varied greatly from wear to wear. Now, like I said, I've probably worn it 5 or 6 times as my scent of the day. So some of those wears may have been attributed to, who knows, maybe I had COVID or something and I couldn't smell, or Damn it, I just said that on the video. Now this video is probably going to be blackballed or something. There'll be a stupid warning sign about COVID-related information down below. But maybe my nose just wasn't on its game that day. Even reviewers, like even fragrance reviewers can have a bad day, right? So maybe I just wasn't picking up the fragrance well. But I have noticed that sometimes when I wear the fragrance, it feels like it almost like fast forwards through that 15 minutes and bam, starts at her later type dry down in the heart of the fragrance, where you do get a little bit more of that orris butter, and you know, you can still pick up the green mossiness, but it feels like a different fragrance here than here, right? That fresh 15, and look how, you know, it's a pretty thick fragrance. You can see the oils on your skin. And so that specific opening for the first 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but I'm just sharing, you know, my experience with wearing the fragrance. Sometimes it feels like some of that detailed part in the opening gets skipped or glossed over, okay? Like this morning when I sprayed this on before work, I didn't pick up what I'm picking up when I sprayed it on after work. It was like the fragrance chopped off, like someone went to an editing site and just chopped off the first 20 minutes of the fragrance, and bam, we were 20 to 30 minutes in already. And I don't know why that is, you know, I have no clue. I don't know whether it's just not my nose picking it up. I don't know whether it's weather conditions, but it's something that I did want to share with you. Now, this morning I happened to spray it in the car, so maybe that changed the way I viewed it. But it just seems to jump to the heart quicker. I like it when it goes a little more slowly and breaks down like I'm getting it now, spraying it on after work. Now, the elephant in the room. This was a blind buy for me when I bought this, and I was basically influenced to blind buy it by Papa P, Persolaise, okay? He had Francesca Bianchi on a live stream, and when he smelled Freefall, Etruscan Water, for the first time, I remember him saying, and you can probably still find the live stream, I haven't watched it in years, so I don't know, but he basically said that it reminded him of vintage Azuree, and I went, what? Vintage Azuree, and I just bought the damn thing. That's all I had to hear, because vintage Azuree, I think, is one of the finest fragrances I've ever smelled, and I promptly bought a bottle, okay? Now, as I said, I've had this whenever she was on his stream, 2020 or whatever it was. Can't remember exactly when, but I was heavily disappointed in this. I was heavily disappointed in this when I got it. And for anyone who is even remotely curious, vintage Azuree absolutely wipes the floor with Etruscan Water, okay? So it whips it into submission. It puts it into the corner and just beats it like a dog, all right? It isn't even a contest. Vintage Azuree is one of the finest fragrances ever made. Bernard Champ made this. I'll do a Vintage Hall of Fame review of Vintage Azuree one day. My God, man. Just even smelling it. There's a couple fragrances for me. This is one. Diaghilev is another one. When I smell them from the atomizer even, I don't even have to spray. I'm just like, fuck me. This is a proper leather chypre, all right? Marketed towards women, my God. What a fragrance, though. And so, like I said, it absolutely whips it. And I do think, though, that even though I disagree with Papa P's, you know, his comparing it to Azuree, I do think he at least maybe got the genre correctly, because I do think that this could be put into the vintage leather chypre-like category. And the reason is that there is a labdanum note in here. You may have picked up in the note listing. You also may have picked up there's no leather note. So even though there's no leather, the labdanum, as it dries down, once you get to the 2, 3, 4 hour mark, and this is a very long fragrance, by the way. One thing about Francesca Bianchi's fragrances is that a lot of them do last a very long time, and I know a lot of people like that about her perfumery. She uses a lot of, let's say, notes that really make it sticky and make it stick to the skin, okay? So while the top feels like you get that green, hesperidic, rindy, citrusy feel like I was trying to describe earlier, slightly astringent is how some folks have described it in the opening. When it dries down and once those more volatile citrusy notes kind of fly off of your skin, right? You're left with this mysterious, mossy, orris butter-like feel, but with a little bit of a leathery tint because of that labdanum, and I love labdanum. Labdanum is one of my favorite ingredients in perfumery. Actually, I think labdanum is one of those ingredients that could be a note on its own. Like it could be a perfume on its own. It's so beautiful in even just in its own form. Just labdanum itself is so complex, and labdanum and oud are two ingredients that I just love smelling by themselves, right? But I do feel like it shares a very similar problem with unspoken musk, which I reviewed yesterday. And the problem is that the animalics here, while they're here, and you can smell them, I mentioned the ambergris in the top, right? And probably the ambergris is used to affix it to the skin as it dries down. She used the animalics in a very reserved way. And my favorite Francesca Bianchi fragrances are the ones where the animalics are much more turned up. Think of Lover's Tale, where like you imagine two bodies pressed against each other in a hot room with the door closed all weekend, just going to the bathroom and coming back and indulging in each other, right? That's a Lover's Tale. And so this is more an office wear for me. Like, I think I wore this to the office today. It worked beautifully in today's Texas spring, rainy spring May day, if you will. But I would prefer the animalics turned up a little bit more, my personal opinion. Like the leather in this is so prominent and so thick and butch and rich and just leather with claws is how I would describe Azuree. But, you know, there's so many things that I've kind of been thinking about. And somebody left a very, very interesting comment that got me thinking. If you go to my Unspoken Musk video, you can find it. It's still there. But this person basically, in a nutshell, it was a well thought out comment. So whoever you are, commenter who I've never seen before, thank you. But I wanted to be like, is this Francesca Bianchi writing this? But basically the comment said, if Creed can have their ambergris accord, and if Tom Ford can have their Western oud, and if Guerlain can have their vanilla, you know, you get where this is going, then Francesca Bianchi can have her orris butter. And it was a brilliant comment because it at least made me think. But I got to thinking, is it her orris butter? Is it really hers? She obviously created this overdose thing. She house DNA accord. I mean, Guerlain has the Guerlainade, right? And I understand what that person was saying. But you know, thinking about it, is anything really anyone's? I mean, all of perfumery is similar notes blended in a very different way. And sometimes when a new note comes along, like vanillin or whatever, the vanilla accord that was used in Shalimar, sometimes you get like a completely different type smell. But in general, there are there's very little does something new come along. That's why I think oud will probably be here forever. Oud's not going away. For those of you who love oud, yay. For those of you who hate it, boo, right? But if you go back, you know, and you think about the controversies in the beginning, even something like Shalimar, which is a top 10 fragrance for me. I think Shalimar is one of the greatest fragrances of all time. But even Shalimar, there was Emerald by Coty. And was it Emerald first or Shalimar first, right? And there was that argument. Even with something like Coty's Chypre, which technically you could draw a straight line from Coty's Chypre to this. This is a Chypre. Coty's Chypre was the first, basically. And then you have Mitsuko. Which one's the best? Mitsuko, Coty's Chypre. There's that sort of, there's that combat, right? And so if you watched my early Francesca Bianchi videos, I mentioned that under my skin, that orris butter accord that she used reminded me a lot of things like Bala Versailles, which came out decades and decades before Francesca Bianchi was doing her type of orris butter accord. And then to go even further, you know, Salome by Liz Moore's Papillons brand did this orris butter feel, ambery thing, with the animalics and stuff like that that felt like a lover's skin years before Under My Skin came out. So, you know, just a little bit of a ramble. I was thinking a lot about it. Is it her orris butter accord? I think she created an accord out of these materials that are interesting and I enjoy it, but I would like to see her kind of take the next step as a perfumer. Someone said she created a great accord, but I don't think she's a very good perfumer. And that's actually how I feel about her, to be honest with you. I think she created an amazing accord. I love her orris butter accord. It's beautiful. I mean, how could you not? It's absolutely beautiful. But I want to see more stuff like this. Even though this is not my favorite from her, I want to see more stuff like this because I want to see what else she can do as a perfumer. We know what you can do with that Orris Butter Accord. This sets it apart a little bit. And, you know, I think, but what makes that Orris Butter Accord so special is I think she managed to make her Orris Butter smell buttery. I mean, it really smells like thick cream. Like, think like thick Nivea cream, you know, you get out of like a container, not the lotion you would get out of a pump, but like a cream so thick you have to scoop it out with your hand kind of thing. It just feels thick and warm, like that roll opening imagery before you put the butter on, right? And the steam goes everywhere. And I've seen some of her fragrances, like for example, if you go watch my review of the Dark Side had this Iris Orris thing, which I thought the Iris Accord in there felt a little bit more powdery than her usual ambery, vanillic, thick, you know, Nivea cream like Orris butter that she usually uses, right? So I think what makes Etruscan Water somewhat special in the Francesca Bianchi universe is that it feels like a finished composition. Like it feels like she had a plan, she put it together. You can get the top of the fragrance, you can get the heart, you can get the leathery, almost labdanum heavy dry down, mossy, very mossy by the way, and almost in that leathery, mossy dry down, sometimes it's almost like you pick up something that's a slight wisp of incense, slightly smoky too, but all of this is slight and elegant, perfect for the office in my opinion, and I like her fragrances when she uses those hardcore animalics, right? So, and then onto the name. The name of Etruscan Water, the Tuscany coast, basically, when you think of Etruscan perfumes, which, very interestingly, there was a fragrance for men. There is a fragrance for men. I think this is still available, called Tuscany per Uomo. And this is a vintage bottle. You can kind of tell by a couple things, the star on the bottom, but this is an older version. This is an Aramis perfume for men, all right? I love this stuff, by the way. When I think of Tuscany, this is what I think of for men. This is what I want to wear when I think of Tuscany. And it also gives this sort of sun-shining, bright, summer days, dry and mysterious, mossy, leathery dry downs. And actually, I like the leathery, mossy dry down here. I think they both lean masculine, but, you know, if this is feminine and this is masculine, it's like this, you know. This is still to the masculine side, but this is even more masculine, right? And so I think Etruscan Water is like a niche take on this DNA that Aramis does better. I'll do a Vintage Hall of Fame review on this. There's no doubt this is one of the best versions of this DNA, if you will, in my opinion. And so that's the other thing that I think she is competing against in my mind. And that's why, going back to the beginning, I'm not tooting my own horn, but my mentor is 100% right. With all knowledge comes responsibility. And once you've smelled all of these perfumes, you can almost like stack rank them in your head. And what's worth it for you? Is it worth spending $108? I know that's not a lot of money nowadays. I think it's a good value for money. You have to give her props where props is due. I'm glad she does these smaller 30 ml bottles. But, you know, for me, this just doesn't have a place in my collection. Like, if you said, Ramsey, keep 10 Chypras, this wouldn't be one of them. You know, this would definitely be one of them. Diaghilev would be one of them. Mitsuko would be one of them. Would this be one of them? No, it wouldn't be. And so that is an issue, but is it a bad fragrance? No. Do I enjoy it? Yes. Am I glad I got a chance to wear it and get to know it and review it for you guys? Absolutely. There's still more Francesca Bianchi reviews to come. You know, if you have any experience with Etruscan Water, I would love to know your thoughts. Do let me know. Leave your feedback below. I love seeing your faces in the comments. Thank you to everyone who has been a part of the Ram fam forever and subscribing and liking and all that stuff. And I'm going to do very special videos when we get to 10,000 subscribers. I joked with somebody today that when we get to 20,000, I'll start my own fragrance brand. So there's a little carrot dangling for you guys. That was probably a terrible joke. I probably shouldn't have put that on record. But there it is. So who knows? Maybe one day there'll be a Ramsey fragrance brand. But anyways, I appreciate everyone watching and being here. Love you guys very much. Cheers, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.